The heavy leather folder slammed against the glass table with a loud crack. Papers spilled out, sliding across the smooth surface and stopping right at Chiamaka's hands. She stared at the sharp edge of the white paper, then slowly lifted her eyes to look at the man sitting across from her. He was supposed to be dead. For 3 years she had visited an empty grave, crying until she had nothing left, mourning the man who had promised to love her forever. But here he was, Jun Wu. He was alive, wearing a custom black suit that cost more than most people made in a year. His dark hair was styled back, his broad shoulders filling out the expensive fabric perfectly. He had the same strong jaw, the same tiny scar right below his left ear, and the same deep brown eyes. But those eyes were completely empty. There was no love in them, there was no memory of her, there was only raw, burning hate. "Your numbers are trash," Jun Wu said. His voice was deep, cutting through the freezing air conditioning of the Houston high-rise office. Outside the thick windows, the Texas sun was beating down, baking the city in 100-degree heat, but inside this room it felt like an icebox. "You brought me a dead company, Ms. Chiamaka. I don't buy dead things, I bury them. You are wasting my damn time." Chiamaka dug her fingernails into her own palms. The pain helped keep her grounded. It kept her from screaming. She wanted to reach across the table, grab his face, and shake him until he remembered. She wanted to press her lips to his and make him wake up from whatever sick nightmare had stolen his mind. But she could not do that. She had tried that 2 months ago when she first found out he was alive, and he had looked at her like she was a diseased rat before calling his security guards to throw her out into the street. He did not remember her. Worse, his new business partners, the ruthless rivals who had pulled him from that car crash and hidden him away, had filled his empty head with lies. They told him Chiamaka was the enemy. They told him she was a greedy, backstabbing snake who wanted to ruin him, and he believed them completely. "The numbers are solid, Mr. CEO," Chiamaka said, forcing her voice to stay calm and even. She ignored the way her heart hammered against her ribs. "If you look at the projections for the 3rd quarter, you will see a 30% growth. Our supply chain in the South is unmatched." Jun Wu leaned back in his leather chair. He tilted his head, looking her up and down. His gaze felt heavy, trailing over the tight fit of her red pencil skirt and the crisp white blouse she wore. A strange muscle jumped in his jaw. He hated her. He had been told she was pure evil, but every single time she was in the room, his body reacted to her in a way he could not control. It made him furious. It made him want to break her just to prove he was in charge. "I don't give a shit about your 3rd quarter, he spat. He stood up, towering over the table. "I want your warehouses, I want your shipping routes, I don't want you. Sell me the assets, step down as CEO and walk away. Or I will crush this little company of yours into dust and you will walk away with nothing." If you are enjoying this video, please leave a like right now. It really helps the algorithm push more videos like this to you. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think Chiamaka should keep fighting to make Jun Wu remember her, or should she just walk away and let him be this cold stranger? Also, what do you think is going to happen when he finally realizes he was brainwashed by her enemies? Have you ever had to face someone you loved who suddenly acted like they hated you for no reason? Let me know below. And if you want to see how this crazy reunion turns out, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Chiamaka did not blink. She did not cry. The old Chiamaka, the girl who used to bake him cookies and laugh in his arms, was gone. That girl died the day the police told her his car had gone off the bridge into the deep water. The woman sitting here now had built an empire from her grief. She was not going to let him tear it down, and she sure as hell was not going to let his fake friends keep him as their puppet. She stood up slowly. She pushed her chair back, the wheels rolling silently on the thick carpet. She did not gather her papers. Instead, she walked around the edge of the large glass table. The room was totally silent except for the low hum of the air conditioning vents. Every step she took brought her closer to him. Jun Wu went perfectly still, his hands curled into tight fists at his sides. He watched her approach, his dark eyes locked on her face. She stopped right in front of him. She was close enough to smell his cologne. It was the same damn scent, cedar and black pepper. It made a painful lump form in her throat, but she swallowed it down. "I am not stepping down," Chiamaka said softly. She looked right up into his face. "And I am not selling you my assets. We are going to partner on this deal, you and me." Jun Wu let out a harsh, dry laugh. He looked down at her, his lip curling in disgust. "You really are crazy, aren't you? They told me you were completely out of your mind. Why the fuck would I partner with a lying, desperate woman like you?" "Because you need my network to expand into the South," Chiamaka shot back, not backing away an inch. And because you know I am right, you are a smart man, Jun Wu, you always were. Do not use my first name, he growled. His voice dropped low, vibrating with sudden anger. He took a half-step forward, closing the tiny gap between them. Now they were chest to chest. Chiamaka had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. You do not know me. You think because you fed me some bullshit story about us being together in the past, that gives you the right to talk to me like we are friends. We are not friends. You are a target. That is all. Chiamaka felt a sharp sting behind her eyes, but she bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted copper. Fuck him, she thought. Fuck this whole situation. But she could not give up, not yet. She looked at the tiny scar on his chin. She remembered the day he got it. They had been trying to build a bookshelf in their first tiny apartment, and he had slipped with a wrench. He had laughed while she pressed a towel to his bleeding face. He had kissed her with blood on his chin, and told her he would build 100 crooked bookshelves, if it meant she would look at him with so much care. I know you better than you know yourself right now, she whispered. Jun Wu's breath hitched. He hated the way her voice sounded. It sounded too soft, too familiar. It made a weird, dull ache start in the back of his skull. Whenever she got this close, his head started to pound, like a locked door in his brain was trying to rattle open. He hated it. He hated her for making him feel weak. He reached out and grabbed her upper arm. His grip was hard and bruising. You don't know shit, he said coldly. Chiamaka did not pull away. She looked down at his large hand wrapping around her arm, then looked back up into his angry eyes. If I am just a target, Mr. Seo, why is your heart beating so fast? Jun Wu froze. His chest was indeed rising and falling too quickly. He dropped her arm like her skin was on fire. He took a fast step back, creating distance between them. He straightened his tie, his face turning hard as stone again. Get out of my office, he ordered. He pointed toward the heavy wooden doors. Take your trash files and get the hell out. My assistant will validate your parking. Do not come back here. Before Chiamaka could reply, the office doors swung open. A tall woman walked in. She wore a tight black dress and incredibly high heels that clicked loudly against the floor. It was Valerie. Valerie was the daughter of the man who had supposedly saved Jun Wu. She was the one constantly whispering poison in his ear. Valerie walked straight over to Jun Wu and placed a hand flat on the center of his chest. She gave Chiamaka a nasty, fake smile. Is this woman bothering you, June? Valerie asked, using a sweet, baby-like voice. I told security to keep her out. I don't know how she got past the front desk. Chiamaka felt a hot spike of pure rage hit her stomach. She watched Valerie's manicured fingers stroke the lapel of Jun Wu's suit. Jun Wu did not pull away from Valerie, but his eyes never left Chiamaka. She was just leaving, Jun Wu said flatly. Actually, Chiamaka said, her voice turning sharp and loud. She walked back to her side of the table and gathered her papers. She shoved them roughly into her leather folder. I am not leaving until we have an agreement. Valerie laughed. It was a high, annoying sound. Honey, you are embarrassing yourself. He doesn't want your failing company, and he definitely doesn't want you. You need to pack up your little briefcase and go back to whatever hole you crawled out of. Chiamaka ignored Valerie completely. She looked only at the man she loved, the man who was currently letting another woman touch him. 1 week, Chiamaka said. She picked up the folder and held it against her chest. Give me 1 week to prove my supply lines can outpace your current vendors by 50%. If I fail, I will sign over my company for pennies. I will walk away and you will never see my face again. Jun Wu narrowed his eyes. The offer was crazy. She was basically offering to hand him a multi-million-dollar company for free if she could not meet an impossible goal. His business brain told him to take the bet. It was free money. But there was something in her dark, intense eyes that made him hesitate. She looked too confident. She looked like a woman who had nothing left to lose. June, just have security throw her out, Valerie whined, pulling on his arm. She is clearly unstable. Shut up, Valerie, Jun Wu snapped. He didn't even look at the woman holding his arm. Valerie's mouth dropped open in shock, her face turning red. Jun Wu kept his eyes locked on Chiamaka. The heavy Texas heat from the window seemed to finally push through the freezing AC, making the air between them feel thick and suffocating. You want a bet? Jun Wu asked, his voice low and dangerous. I want a chance to prove you are wrong, Chiamaka said firmly, about the numbers and about me. Jun Wu walked slowly around the table again. He stopped right in front of her. He looked down at her face, studying the determined set of her jaw. He wanted to break that confidence. He wanted to see her fail, just so she would finally leave him alone and stop making his head hurt. Fine, he said. 1 week, but if you fail, you give me the company and you leave Houston. You pack your bags and get the fuck out of this state. I never want to see you again. Chiamaka felt her heart crack down the middle. Hearing him tell her to disappear felt like a physical punch to the gut, but she refused to show him any weakness. She lifted her chin, her eyes burning with fierce determination. And if I win, Chiamaka said, you take me to dinner, just you and me. No assistants, no bodyguards, no Valerie. Valerie gasped from across the room. You stupid bitch. Deal, Jun Wu interrupted, cutting Valerie off again. He stared at Chiamaka's lips for a split second before forcing his eyes back up to hers. 1 week, Miss Chiamaka. Enjoy your last few days as a CEO. He turned his back on her and walked toward his massive desk. He didn't look back. Chiamaka stood there for a long moment, watching the broad line of his shoulders. She tucked her folder under her arm, turned on her heel and walked out of the freezing office. As soon as the heavy wooden doors clicked shut behind her, she let out a shaky breath. The hallway was empty. The thick carpet absorbed the sound of her heels as she walked toward the elevators. Her hands were shaking violently now. She leaned against the cold metal of the elevator doors and closed her eyes. She had 1 week. 1 week to save her company, destroy the people who stole him, and figure out how to get her man back, or she would lose everything. The metal doors of the elevator slid shut, sealing Chiamaka inside the small, mirrored box. The silence was heavy and thick. She stared at her own reflection. Her dark skin looked pale under the harsh fluorescent lights and her eyes were wide and terrified. She had just gambled everything she owned on a single week. Her knees finally gave out. She slid down the cool metal wall until she hit the floor, letting out a shaky breath that sounded like a sob. But she did not cry. Crying was for the weak. Crying was for the girl who thought her life had ended 3 years ago. The woman she was now did not have time for tears. She pulled her phone from her pocket. Her fingers were shaking so badly, she dropped it twice on the elevator floor before she managed to pick it up and dial Marcus. Marcus was her shipping manager. He was also the only person in her company who knew the real truth about the man sitting up in that freezing office. The phone rang 3 times before Marcus picked up. The loud, clanking sound of the shipping yard filled the background of the call. Boss, Marcus answered. His voice was rough and tired. Tell me you got the signature. Tell me we are safe. I did not get the signature, Chiamaka said. She pressed the phone hard against her ear and squeezed her eyes shut. He wants to buy us out. He wants to tear us apart and sell the pieces. He told me to step down. Fuck, Marcus swore loudly over the phone. A truck horn blared behind him. I knew it. I told you this was a bad idea, Marka. The man is not your fiance anymore. He is a damn shark. They scrambled his brains and turned him into a machine. We need to hire lawyers right now. We need to file for protection. No, Chiamaka said, her voice turning hard. She forced herself to stand up as the elevator neared the ground floor. She dusted off her red pencil skirt. Lawyers take too long. He has more money than God, Marcus. He will bury us in court fees before we even get a hearing. I made a deal with him. What kind of deal? Marcus asked. He sounded suspicious. Marka, please tell me you did not do something stupid. I told him we could beat his current shipping numbers by 50% in 1 week, she said plainly. The line went completely dead quiet. For a long moment the only sound was the low hum of the elevator reaching the lobby. Are you out of your damn mind? Marcus finally yelled. His voice cracked with panic. 50% in a week. Our trucks are already running on worn-out tires. Half our drivers are pulling double shifts just to keep up with the normal load. The Houston heat is blowing out radiators left and right. It is 104 degrees out here today. We cannot push these engines any harder without them catching fire. We have to, Chiamaka said. The elevator doors opened. She stepped out into the massive, empty lobby of the corporate building. Pay them double overtime. Rent extra trucks from the guys in Austin. Offer the drivers a cash bonus at the end of the week. I do not care what it costs. Drain the emergency fund. If we fail, we are bankrupt, Marcus warned her. If we drain the fund and miss the target, we lose the warehouse, we lose the trucks, we lose the whole damn business. If we fail, I already promised to sign the company over to him for pennies, she admitted quietly. She pushed through the heavy glass doors of the building and stepped out into the parking garage. You did what? Marcus shouted. Chiamaka, you bet my job. You bet all of our jobs on a crazy game to win back a man who doesn't even know your name. I bet on us, she snapped back. The thick, wet heat of the Texas afternoon hit her like a brick wall. The air in the concrete parking garage was suffocating. It smelled like hot asphalt and car exhaust. Sweat instantly broke out on her forehead, ruining her perfect makeup. I bet on my team. We built this from the dirt up, Marcus. I am not letting his fake little friends steal it from me. Get the floor ready. I am driving back to the yard right now. We are going to war. She hung up the phone before he could argue anymore. She walked quickly to her black sedan. It was an older model, a car she had bought years ago when she and Jun Wu were just starting out. She refused to sell it. She unlocked the door, threw her leather folder onto the passenger seat, and cranked the engine. The air conditioning blasted hot air into her face for a full minute before it finally started to cool down. She gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles turning white. She had 1 week to pull off a miracle. 50 floors above the baking Houston streets, Jun Wu stared at the heavy wooden doors of his office long after Chayamaka had walked through them. His chest felt tight. He reached up and loosened his expensive silk tie. The freezing air in the room suddenly felt like it was not enough. He walked over to the corner of his office where a small crystal cart sat. He grabbed a heavy glass and poured himself 2 fingers of dark whiskey. He drank it fast, letting the burn slide down his throat to distract him from the sudden, sharp pain pounding behind his eyes. I cannot believe you gave that bitch the time of day, Valerie complained. She threw herself down onto the white leather sofa in the middle of the room. She crossed her long legs, letting her black dress ride up high on her thighs. She pouted her lips at him. My father warned you about her, June. He told you she was a snake. She is just trying to use you to save her trashy little business. Shut up, Valerie, Jun Wu said again. He set the empty glass down on the cart with a loud clink. He did not look at her. He rubbed his fingers hard against his temples. Do not tell me to shut up, Valerie whined, standing up. She walked over to him, her high heels clicking sharply on the floor. She wrapped her arms around his waist from behind and pressed her face against his back. I am just looking out for you. We saved you from that terrible crash. We took care of you when you had nobody. She never even came looking for you. She just wanted your money. Jun Wu felt his stomach twist. That was the story they had told him. They said he was a wealthy investor who got into a horrible wreck. They said his greedy business partner, Chayamaka, had cut his brake lines to get rid of him. They said his memory loss was a side effect of the trauma. He believed them. He had to. They were the only faces he saw when he woke up in that private hospital bed 2 years ago. But whenever Chayamaka was near him, the story felt wrong. His body reacted to her differently. When she looked at him, he felt a strange pulling sensation in his chest, like an invisible string was trying to drag him toward her. It made him incredibly angry. He hated feeling out of control. He reached down, grabbed Valerie's wrists and pulled her arms off him. He turned around, his face a mask of pure ice. I said shut up. I am not stupid. I know she is playing a game, and I am going to make sure she loses. Valerie smiled, showing her perfectly white teeth. Good, crush her. Make her leave the state just like you promised. Jun Wu walked back to his desk and picked up his desk phone. He pressed a single button to connect to his head of security. Get me the union boss for the Southern trucking routes on the phone, Jun Wu ordered, his voice flat and dead. And call the Port Authority in Galveston. I want extra inspections on every single truck registered to Chayamaka's company. I want them stopped at way stations. I want their paperwork checked twice. Delay them. Make their tires spin in the mud. Yes, Mr. CEO, the voice on the phone answered quickly. Jun Wu hung up. He looked out the massive window at the sprawling, hot city of Houston. He was going to break her. He was going to watch her fail, take her company, and force her out of his city. Then maybe the phantom headaches would finally stop. Maybe he would finally be able to sleep without dreaming of a woman laughing in a tiny kitchen, smelling of vanilla and warm sugar. 30 minutes later, Chayamaka pulled her sedan into the dirt lot of her shipping yard. The East Houston yard was a massive, dusty property surrounded by a tall chain-link fence. Huge metal warehouses sat baking in the brutal sun. Giant 18-wheeler trucks roared in and out of the gates, kicking up thick clouds of brown dust that coated everything. The noise was deafening. Mechanics were shouting over the sounds of impact wrenches, and giant exhaust fans hummed loudly, trying to push the suffocating heat out of the loading bays. Chayamaka parked her car and grabbed her folder. The second she stepped out, her heels sank slightly into the hot dirt. She did not care. She walked quickly past a row of massive trucks. Drivers sitting in the shade of their cabs nodded at her as she passed. They respected her. They knew she had built this place from nothing after the crash. She walked into the main warehouse. It smelled heavily of motor oil, sweat, and hot metal. Marcus was waiting for her near the dispatch office. He was a big man with a thick beard and a dirty baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He had a clipboard in his hands, and he looked sick to his stomach. "Tell me the plan," Chayamaka said, walking right up to him. She didn't waste time with greetings. "The plan is a suicide mission," Marcus grumbled. He led her into the small, glass-walled dispatch office in the center of the warehouse. A window AC unit rattled loudly in the wall, spitting out barely cool air. I pulled the numbers. To hit a 50% increase, we have to run 80 trucks a day instead of our usual 50. We only own 60 trucks. 10 are currently in the shop for engine repairs. "Fix them," Chayamaka said. She tossed her folder onto the cluttered desk. She unbuttoned the top button of her crisp white blouse. The heat in the office was still miserable. "Pull parts from the junkyard if you have to. Tape them together. Just get them running." "And the drivers?" Marcus asked, crossing his arms. "The law says they can only drive a certain amount of hours a day. We cannot break federal laws, Marca. We will lose our license." "We hire independent contractors," she fired back, pointing at the large map of Texas pinned to the wall. "Call every freelance driver in the tri-state area. I will pay them double the standard rate. Tell them to bring their own rigs if they have them. We will cover their fuel costs." Marcus rubbed a dirty hand down his face, leaving a streak of grease on his cheek. "Do you know how much money that is going to burn? We will be broke by Friday." "If we don't hit the target by next Wednesday, we will be broke anyway," she reminded him. "Marcus, look at me." Marcus stopped looking at his clipboard and met her eyes. "I know this is crazy," she said softly. Her voice lost its sharp edge for just a moment. "I know I am asking you to risk your livelihood for my personal baggage, but I saw him today. He is completely lost. They have poisoned his mind. If I lose this company, I lose my only leverage to stay near him. I lose my only chance to fix him." Marcus let out a long, heavy sigh. He had been there 3 years ago when she was sobbing on the floor of her apartment, holding Jun Wu's empty jacket. He knew how much she loved that man. "Fine," Marcus said. "I will make the calls, but you are going down to the floor to tell the crew. They are tired, Marca. They are going to need a hell of a speech to work these hours in this heat." "I will handle the crew," Chayamaka promised. Suddenly the door to the small office flew open. Big Dan, one of their oldest and best drivers, stood in the doorway. He was completely drenched in sweat. His face was red and he looked furious. He held a crumpled piece of yellow paper in his giant fist. "We got a massive problem, boss," Big Dan said, his deep voice booming over the rattle of the AC unit. "I just got back from the port of Galveston. I sat at the gate for 3 damn hours." Chayamaka felt a cold spike of panic hit her stomach. 3 hours? Why, you had priority clearance for that load of steel pipes. "Not anymore," Big Dan spat. He threw the yellow paper onto the desk. "Port Authority flagged my rig. They said they got an anonymous tip about safety violations. They held me up, searched the whole truck, checked every strap, and made me weigh in twice. By the time they let me through, the dock workers had gone on lunch break. We are already half a day behind schedule." Marcus looked at Chayamaka, his eyes wide. "The Port Authority never runs random checks on us. We have a perfect safety record." Chayamaka picked up the yellow paper. It was a violation warning. Her hands started to shake again, but this time it was not from fear. It was from pure hot anger. She knew exactly who had made that anonymous tip. Jun Wu. He was not just waiting for her to fail. He was actively trying to destroy her. "That son of a bitch," she whispered. She crushed the yellow paper in her fist. She looked up at Marcus and Big Dan. Her eyes were blazing. "He wants to play dirty. Fine, we play dirty too." The hot dust of the shipping yard blew through the open warehouse doors, but Chayamaka did not blink. She stood in the small dispatch office and slammed her fist down on the desk. The cheap metal rattled loudly. Marcus and Big Dan jumped back a little, surprised by the sheer force of her anger. She was not crying. She was not falling apart. She looked like a woman ready to burn the whole city down. "Get the physical maps out," Chayamaka ordered. She pointed at the filing cabinet in the corner. "The GPS routes are useless now. If his people are watching the main highways and the ports, we don't use them." "Boss, we have to use the highways," Big Dan said. He wiped the thick sweat from his forehead with a dirty rag. "These rigs weigh 40 tons. We cannot exactly hide them in the bushes." "We do not hide them," Chayamaka said smoothly. Her brain was moving a mile a minute. "We use the old farm roads, the dirt paths out west, the private logging routes up north. I know for a fact that my grandfather used to run shipments through the old county lines before the state built the new interstate. The way stations only operate on the main commercial highways. If we take the back roads, it takes longer, but we do not get stopped. We do not get searched. Marcus pulled a huge paper map out of the cabinet and spread it over the desk. The dirt roads will tear up the tires, he warned, and the drivers will complain about the bumpiness. I am paying them double, she shot back. They can handle a few bumps. Dan, you are the lead driver. You know those back roads better than anyone. Map out a new route for every single truck leaving this yard tonight. Avoid every state-run way station between here and the border. You got it, boss, Dan said, a slow, wicked grin spreading across his face. He loved breaking the rules, especially when some rich suit in a high-rise was trying to push them around. He grabbed a red marker and started circling towns on the map. And what are you going to do? Marcus asked, looking up at Chiamaka. We still need more drivers to hit that 50% mark. We are tapped out. I am going to get more drivers, Chiamaka said. She grabbed her leather folder and turned toward the door. Jun Wu thinks he can play dirty by calling the Port Authority on me. Let us see how he likes it when I steal his entire damn workforce. The neon sign of the Rusty Anchor Bar buzzed loudly against the dark Texas sky. The bar sat on the very edge of the city, right where the concrete turned into empty dirt fields. It was the main hangout for independent truckers. The parking lot was packed with massive semi-trucks, their engines turned off for the night. Chiamaka parked her sedan between two giant rigs and stepped out into the humid night air. The heat had not broken at all since the sun went down. It felt like walking through warm soup. She pushed open the heavy wooden door of the bar. The smell of cheap beer, stale cigarette smoke, and fried food hit her instantly. The place was packed with rough-looking men and women in dirty jeans and boots. The loud jukebox was playing an old country song. A few heads turned to look at her. She stood out like a sore thumb in her expensive red skirt and crisp white blouse, but she kept her chin high. She walked straight to the long wooden bar and slammed a thick stack of $100 bills onto the sticky surface. The bartender, a big guy with tattoos covering his arms, stopped wiping down a glass and stared at the money. I need your attention, Chiamaka said loudly. Her voice carried over the music. She turned around to face the crowded room. Turn the music off. The bartender quickly reached under the counter and killed the jukebox. The bar went completely silent. Everyone was staring at the woman with the cash. My name is Chiamaka, she said, her voice echoing in the quiet room. I own South Star Shipping. I know most of you in here contract for CO Logistics. I know what they pay you. I know they treat you like replaceable trash, and I know they make you pay for your own fuel. A few of the truckers muttered in agreement. A tall man in the back crossed his arms and leaned against the pool table. What is your point, lady? He called out roughly. My point is that I have a job for you, she answered, not missing a beat. She tapped the stack of cash on the bar. Starting tonight, I am hiring every single independent rig in this room. I will pay you double whatever CO is paying you. I will cover your fuel. I will pay your toll fees. And if you run the routes I give you without stopping, I will hand you a $5,000 cash bonus on Wednesday night. The entire bar erupted into loud whispers. Double pay and covered fuel was completely unheard of in the trucking world. It was a golden ticket. What is the catch? The tall man asked, stepping forward. Nobody pays that kind of money just to haul boxes. The catch is that you work exclusively for me for the next 7 days, Chiamaka said, staring the man dead in the eye. You do not answer your phones if CO Logistics calls you. You leave their docks empty. You haul my freight and you haul it fast. If you want the money, line up. If you want to keep driving for pennies, finish your beer and get out of my way. Not a single person walked out the door. Within 10 minutes she had a line of 40 drivers waiting to sign temporary contracts. She sat at a sticky booth in the corner, writing down names and handing out advance cash. She was draining her company's bank account to zero, but she did not care. She was completely focused on the war. She was going to make Jun Wu notice her, even if she had to burn both of their companies to the ground to do it. 50 miles away, the smell of roasted meat and expensive cigars filled the private dining room of a high-end steakhouse. Jun Wu sat at the head of a long mahogany table, nursing a glass of dark red wine. Valerie sat directly to his right, laughing loudly at a joke told by one of the local politicians they were trying to bribe. The room was loud, filled with the sounds of clinking glasses and fake, polite laughter. Jun Wu felt a massive headache building behind his eyes. He hated these dinners. He hated the fake smiles and the empty talk. Mostly he hated that he could not stop thinking about the woman in the red skirt, Chayamaka. Her name tasted strange in his mouth, but it circled his brain like a trapped bird. He remembered the fierce, unbreakable look in her dark eyes when she told him she was going to beat his numbers. He remembered the heat of her skin when he grabbed her arm. It made his chest feel tight. His phone buzzed in his suit pocket. He pulled it out and looked at the screen. It was his night manager at the main warehouse. Jun Wu frowned, pressed the phone to his ear and stood up, walking away from the loud table. "What is it?" Jun Wu asked sharply. "Mr. Seo, we have a massive problem," the night manager said. His voice was shaking with panic. "The midnight fleet did not show up. We have 50 trailers loaded with electronics sitting on the dock and no drivers to pull them. I have been calling the independent contractors for an hour. Nobody is answering their phones." Jun Wu felt a cold spike of anger hit his blood. "What the fuck do you mean nobody is answering? Call the backup list, offer them a premium." "I tried that, sir," the manager said quickly. "One of the dispatchers finally got a hold of a guy. He said South Star Shipping bought out the entire city. That woman, Chayamaka, she went to the Rusty Anchor and paid everyone double to work for her. She stole our entire independent fleet. Our shipments are completely dead in the water." Jun Wu crushed the phone tightly in his hand. The screen almost cracked under his grip. She played dirty. He tried to lock her trucks down at the port, so she went behind his back and bought his entire workforce out from under him. A strange, twisted feeling of respect mixed with his burning fury. She was not a weak, crying victim. She was a goddamn predator. "June, honey, are you okay?" Valerie asked, walking over to him. She reached out to touch his arm. "Come sit back down, the mayor is telling a funny story." Jun Wu pulled his arm away from her touch. He did not even look at her. "The dinner is over," he said coldly. "Tell my driver to bring the car to the front." "What, we cannot just leave?" Valerie whined, her eyes going wide. "This is an important meeting." "I don't give a shit," Jun Wu snapped. His voice was so low and dangerous that Valerie actually took a step backward. "Do as I say, I have to go take care of a rat problem." He turned and walked out of the private room, leaving Valerie standing there with her mouth open. He walked fast through the crowded restaurant, ignoring the waiters and the guests. The headache was pounding against his skull like a hammer now, but he ignored it. He was going to find Chayamaka, and he was going to tear her apart. The South Star shipping yard was quiet by the time Chayamaka returned. It was nearly 2 in the morning. All the trucks were gone, out on the dark dirt roads carrying double loads. The dust had settled into a thin layer over the parked cars. Chayamaka walked into her private office, located on the second floor of the main warehouse. She was completely exhausted. Her feet ached in her high heels, and her white blouse was sticking to her back from the relentless heat. She dropped her heavy folder on her desk and kicked off her shoes. She walked over to the small sink in the corner, turned on the cold water and splashed it onto her face. The shock of the cold water felt amazing. She grabbed a paper towel and patted her skin dry, looking at her tired reflection in the small mirror. She had done it. She had secured the drivers and set the trap. Now she just had to survive the week. Suddenly, the heavy metal door of her office slammed open. The loud crash echoed through the empty room. Chayamaka jumped, dropping the paper towel. She spun around. Jun Wu stood in the doorway. He looked like a nightmare. He had taken off his suit jacket and his white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar. His tie hung loose. His dark hair was messy, falling into his eyes, and his chest was rising and falling in heavy, angry breaths. He stepped into the office and kicked the metal door shut behind him with the heel of his expensive shoe. The lock clicked loudly. "You think you are real smart, don't you?" Jun Wu growled. His voice vibrated in the small room. He walked slowly toward her desk. Chayamaka forced her heart to stop racing. She refused to look scared. She stood up perfectly straight, ignoring the fact that she was barefoot. "I have no idea what you are talking about, Mr. Seo," she said calmly. "Do not play games with me," he shouted. He slammed both of his large hands down onto her desk. The wood groaned under his weight. He leaned across the desk, his face inches from hers. The sharp scent of cedar and black pepper filled her nose, making her breath catch in her throat. "You stole my drivers. You walked into a bar and bought my entire independent fleet. I have 50 trailers rotting on the dock because of you." "That sounds like poor management on your part," Chayamaka shot back. She leaned forward too, refusing to back away from him. "Maybe if you paid your workers a fair wage, they would not abandon you the second someone offered them a better deal." "You breached a verbal agreement," he yelled, his eyes burning with dark fire. "We had a bet. You are supposed to beat my numbers fairly, not sabotage my goddamn company. Chiamaka let out a harsh, bitter laugh. Fairly, you want to talk about fair? You called the port authority and reported my trucks for fake safety violations. You locked my lead driver in a way station for 3 hours. You threw the first punch, Jun Wu. Did you really think I was just going to sit here and let you hit me? Jun Wu froze. He stared at her, genuinely shocked. They had told him she was a weak, greedy woman who got lucky. They told him she was easy to crush. But the woman standing in front of him was fire. She was fearless. The intense hatred he felt for her suddenly twisted into something completely different. It twisted into deep, raw hunger. His eyes dropped from her dark eyes down to her lips, then down to the unbuttoned collar of her white blouse. He watched the rapid pulse beating in her neck. His head pounded viciously, flashing a sudden, blurry image of her laughing in bed, her dark skin glowing under morning light. He squeezed his eyes shut and grabbed his own head with a low groan. Jun Wu, Chiamaka said, her anger instantly melting into panic. She saw the pain on his face. She forgot the war. She forgot the bet. She rushed around the side of the desk and reached out to him. Are you okay? Is it your head? She touched his shoulder. The second her fingers brushed his shirt, he snapped. He reached out, grabbed her by the waist and spun her around, slamming her back against the hard wooden edge of the desk. The impact knocked the breath out of her lungs. Before she could react, he pressed his body entirely against hers, trapping her against the desk. He gripped her hips with bruising force, his face lowering until his lips were just a breath away from hers. Why do you do this to me? He whispered violently. His eyes were wide, filled with confusion, rage, and a desperate need he could not hide. Why does my head feel like it is splitting open every time you touch me? What kind of sick trick are you playing on my mind? Chiamaka could feel the heavy heat of his body pressing against her. She could feel his heart hammering against his chest. She looked up into his tortured eyes, feeling a single tear finally break free and slide down her cheek. It is not a trick, she whispered softly, her voice breaking. She slowly lifted her hand and pressed her palm against his hard cheek. She felt his jaw clench under her touch, but he did not pull away. He leaned into her hand ever so slightly. It is your memory, Jun Wu. It is your heart trying to remember mine. Please, just let yourself remember. He stared at her lips. He wanted to kiss her. He wanted to devour her. The urge was so powerful it scared the hell out of him. He let out a ragged breath, leaning closer, his lips brushing against hers in a feather-light touch. Then, the heavy metal door of her office rattled loudly as someone twisted the locked handle from the outside. Jun Wu flinched like he had been shot. He tore himself away from her, stumbling backward into the center of the room. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, his eyes wide and terrified of what he had almost done. He looked at her one last time, a look of pure, chaotic panic before he turned around, unlocked the door, and stormed out into the dark warehouse, leaving her completely alone in the silent office. The handle rattled again, much louder this time. A heavy fist pounded against the metal door. "Boss, are you in there?" Marcus yelled from the other side. His voice was muffled through the thick steel. "The door is locked." Chiamaka took a deep, shaky breath. She leaned against the edge of her wooden desk, her legs trembling so badly she could barely stand. She pressed her fingers against her lips. They were still buzzing from the heat of his breath. He had been so close. For a single second, the ice in his eyes had melted, and she had seen her Jun Wu looking back at her. But then he ran away. She stood up straight, smoothed down her white blouse and walked over to the door. She unlocked it and pulled it open. Marcus stumbled inside, looking confused. He looked around the empty office, his eyes landing on the open window. "I thought I saw a fancy black car speed out of the lot," Marcus said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Was somebody here? Why was the door locked?" "It was nothing," Chiamaka lied. She walked back to her desk and picked up a pen, pretending to look at a shipping manifest. Her hands were still shaking, so she put the pen down and hid her hands under the desk. "Just a security precaution. What is the status of the dirt road routes?" Marcus frowned. He knew she was lying, but he also knew better than to push her when she had that tight, hard look on her face. He pulled a dirty notepad out of his back pocket. "The first 20 trucks made it past the county line," Marcus said. "No way stations, no port authority cops. We are moving freight fast, but the drivers are complaining. The dirt roads are full of massive potholes. We already had 2 flat tires and the dust is clogging the air filters. The heat out there is 106 degrees. If we keep pushing these engines like this, something is going to blow up. Tell them to keep the speed steady and roll their windows down if the AC fails," Chayamaka ordered. We cannot stop. We have to deliver those electronics to Dallas by tomorrow morning, or we lose the daily bonus. If we lose the bonus, we cannot pay the advance for Friday. We are running on fumes, Maka, Marcus warned her softly. We are pushing our luck. Then we push it until it breaks, she said. Her voice was cold and sharp again. She looked out the window at the dark, empty yard. He thinks I am going to roll over and quit. I am going to show him exactly what I am made of. Miles away, Jun Wu's tires squealed as he took a sharp corner. He was driving his sports car way over the speed limit, flying down the empty Houston highway. The streetlights flashed over the hood of the car, throwing fast shadows across his angry face. He gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were pure white. His chest was heaving. He could not get enough air into his lungs. He rolled down the window, letting the hot, wet night air blast into the car, but it did not help. He could still smell her. He could still feel the soft heat of her skin under his hands. Fuck, he shouted, hitting the steering wheel hard with his fist. Fuck. His head was pounding like a drum. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashes of things that did not make sense. A tiny kitchen, a burnt pancake, a woman with dark skin and a bright red apron laughing at him while wiping flour off his nose. He remembered the exact sound of that laugh. It made his heart ache so badly he felt like he was going to throw up. But it was a lie. It had to be a lie. Valerie and her father had told him the truth. Chayamaka was a monster. She had tried to kill him for his money. She was trying to ruin his business right now. He slammed his foot on the brake and pulled the car roughly into the circular driveway of a massive, gated mansion in the wealthy River Oaks neighborhood. The tires kicked up white gravel as he parked right in front of the giant wooden double doors. He left the car running, slammed the door shut, and marched up the stone steps. He did not knock. He pushed the heavy doors open and walked into the grand foyer. The house was dead quiet. Expensive paintings hung on the walls and a massive crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling. Richard, Jun Wu yelled. His voice echoed up the huge winding staircase. Richard, get down here right now. A moment later, a door upstairs opened. Richard Sterling walked out onto the landing, wearing a silk dark blue robe. He was an older man with silver hair and a sharp, calculating face. He was Valerie's father. He was the man who claimed to have pulled Jun Wu from the burning wreckage 3 years ago. Jun Wu, Richard asked, walking slowly down the stairs. He looked annoyed. Do you know what time it is? What are you doing yelling in my house? I want the truth, Jun Wu demanded. He stood at the bottom of the stairs, glaring up at the older man. You told me Chayamaka was a weak, greedy little scam artist. You told me she was easy to break. But she just bought out my entire independent trucking fleet in one night. She is running circles around my dispatch team. Richard stopped on the bottom step, his eyes narrowed. She did what? She stole my drivers, Jun Wu said, his voice dripping with pure anger. And she did it because you told the port authority to stop her trucks. I told you to let me handle her. I told you I wanted to beat her fairly and take her company. Why the hell are you going behind my back and playing dirty tricks? Richard let out a smooth, fake laugh. He walked past Jun Wu and headed toward the home bar in the living room. I am simply protecting your interests, my boy. That woman is unstable. You cannot play fair with a snake. She tried to kill you once, remember? You cannot trust a single word that comes out of her mouth. Jun Wu watched Richard pour a glass of expensive scotch. The headache spiked again. He rubbed his temples, closing his eyes for a second. I went to see her, he muttered before he could stop himself. Richard froze. He set the heavy glass bottle down on the counter with a loud thud. He turned around, his face suddenly looking very tight and dangerous. You did what? You went to her warehouse, alone. I went to yell at her for stealing my drivers, Jun Wu said defensively. He crossed his arms over his chest. But when I was there, when I looked at her. She tried to manipulate you, Richard interrupted quickly. He walked over and grabbed Jun Wu by the shoulders. His grip was surprisingly strong for an old man. Listen to me, Jun Wu. You have brain damage. The doctors told you this. Your memory is broken and it plays tricks on you. That woman knows this. She is trying to use your confusion to trick you into giving her your empire. Do not let her win. Jun Wu looked at Richard's face. The older man looked genuinely concerned. But deep down in the darkest part of Jun Wu's gut, something felt incredibly wrong. The way Richard's eyes darted around, the tight grip on his shoulders, it felt fake. I am not giving her anything, Jun Wu said flatly. He pushed Richard's hands off his shoulders and took a step back. But I want you to stay out of it. Call off your contacts at the port. Call off the city cops. I made a bet with her for 1 week. If she beats my numbers, she wins. If she fails, she gives me her company and leaves Texas forever. I will crush her myself. Do you understand?" Richard stared at him for a long, silent moment. Then his face relaxed into a smooth, easy smile. "Of course, my boy, whatever you say. You are the boss. I will stay completely out of it." "Good," Jun Wu snapped. He turned around and walked out of the house. He got back into his car and sped away into the dark night. He did not see Richard walk over to the window and watch him leave. Richard pulled a small black cell phone from the pocket of his silk robe. He dialed a number he knew by heart. The line rang twice before a gruff voice answered. "Yeah, boss," the voice said. "The girl is becoming a massive problem," Richard said coldly. "She is moving too much freight and she is getting into Jun Wu's head again. The brainwashing is starting to crack. If he remembers who she really is, we lose the company, we lose the money, and we all go to prison." "What do you want me to do?" the gruff voice asked. "She is using the western dirt roads to move her cargo," Richard ordered. "Take a crew out there tomorrow night, find her lead trucks. I don't care what you have to do. Slash the tires, smash the engines, burn the cargo. Just make sure those trucks never reach Dallas. Break her company in half." By Friday afternoon, the Texas sun felt like it was trying to melt the metal roof of the warehouse. The air inside the South Star shipping dispatch office was thick and heavy. The cheap window AC unit had finally died 2 hours ago, blowing nothing but hot, dusty air into the small room. Chayamaka sat at her desk with her sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun, and a thin layer of sweat coated her neck. She was exhausted. She had not slept more than 3 hours a night since Monday, but she was winning. She looked at the large computer screen on her desk. The green numbers on the spreadsheet kept climbing. Her new drivers were hungry for the cash, and they were driving like madmen. They were currently sitting at a 45% increase over Jun Wu's daily volume. She just needed one more massive push through the weekend, and she would hit the 50% target. She would win the bet. Marcus walked into the office. He looked even worse than she did. His face was covered in dark engine grease, and his shirt was soaked with sweat. He grabbed a plastic bottle of warm water from the desk and chugged the whole thing in 5 seconds. "The Dallas run is locked in," Marcus said, crushing the empty plastic bottle in his fist. "Big Dan is leading a convoy of 10 trucks right now. They are taking County Road 9, straight through the empty desert brush. They should hit the Dallas drop-off point by midnight. Once they unload, we officially cross the 50% line." Chayamaka let out a long breath and leaned back in her chair. A small, tired smile touched her lips. "We did it. We actually did it." "Do not celebrate yet," Marcus warned her, pointing a greasy finger at her. "The trucks are old, the heat is brutal, anything can happen out there in the dirt." Suddenly, the red emergency phone on the wall of the dispatch office started to ring. It was a loud, horrible buzzing noise that cut through the background hum of the warehouse. Chayamaka and Marcus froze. They stared at the red phone. That phone only rang when a driver was in serious trouble. Chayamaka stood up so fast her chair fell over backward. She rushed to the wall and snatched the heavy red receiver off the hook. "South Star Dispatch, talk to me." "Maka, boss, you gotta help us," Big Dan's voice screamed through the speaker. The line was full of loud static and the terrible sound of grinding metal. "Dan, calm down, what is happening? Where are you?" Chayamaka demanded. Her heart slammed against her ribs. "We are on County Road 9, about 40 miles outside the city limits," Big Dan yelled over the noise. "We got ambushed. 3 black SUVs came out of nowhere from the side roads. They rammed my trailer. They ran Jimmy and Frank off into the ditch. Frank's rig is flipped on its side and the engine is smoking." "Who is in the SUVs?" Chayamaka shouted, gripping the phone tightly. "Are they armed?" "I don't know, they got dark windows and no license plates," Dan answered wildly. "They are trying to box me in right now. They are throwing metal spikes on the dirt road. Boss, they are trying to kill us." There was a loud, explosive bang over the phone, followed by the terrible sound of a massive truck tire blowing out. Big Dan screamed as the sound of screeching metal filled the line. Dan, answer me," Chayamaka screamed into the phone. The line went completely dead. She slammed the phone back onto the wall hook. She turned around to face Marcus. Her eyes were wide and all the color had drained from her face. "They attacked the convoy," she said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. "Frank's rig is flipped. They took out Dan's tires. They are stuck out on County Road 9. Marcus grabbed his dirty baseball cap and pulled it hard onto his head. I will call the cops. I will tell them to get out there. No, Chayamaka said sharply. She walked over to her desk and grabbed her car keys. The cops will take an hour to get out there, and they will impound all our cargo as evidence for a crime scene. If we lose that cargo, we lose the bet. We lose the company. Maka, you cannot go out there, Marcus yelled, stepping in front of the door to block her. There are guys in SUVs running our trucks off the road. It is a hit. You are going to get yourself killed. Get the repair van ready, Chayamaka ordered, pointing her keys right at his chest. She was not asking, she was commanding. Load it with extra tires, a heavy jack, and fire extinguishers. If Frank's engine is smoking, we need to put it out before the whole trailer burns. I am not letting some hired thugs destroy my company. Marcus stared at her for a second, seeing the pure, unstoppable fire in her eyes. He knew he could not stop her. He nodded once, turned around, and ran out of the office to prep the van. Chayamaka opened her bottom desk drawer. She pushed aside old files and empty coffee cups until she found what she was looking for. It was a heavy, solid steel wrench. It was over 2 feet long and weighed 10 pounds. She gripped it tightly in her right hand. She was going to save her trucks. And if she found out Jun Wu was the one who sent those black SUVs, she was going to use this wrench to smash every single window in his expensive high-rise office. She marched out of the dispatch room, ready for a war. The heavy repair van bounced violently over the deep ruts of the dirt road, throwing Chayamaka against the passenger door. Marcus was gripping the steering wheel so hard his thick arms were shaking. The headlights of the old van cut through the pitch-black Texas night, revealing nothing but endless dust, rocks, and dry, dead bushes. The van did not have a working air conditioner. The hot wind blowing through the open windows felt like a massive hair dryer blowing directly into Chayamaka's face, but she did not care. She sat perfectly straight in her seat, staring at the dark road ahead. The 10-pound solid steel wrench rested heavy across her lap. She traced her thumb over the cold metal, her jaw locked tight. We are coming up on the 40-mile mark, Marcus yelled over the loud, terrible rattle of the van's engine. He shot a nervous glance at the heavy wrench on her lap. Marka, listen to me. If those guys are still out there, they are going to have weapons. You cannot just run at a group of hired thugs with a piece of metal. Let me handle them. You stay in the van and call the police. I am not calling the cops, and I am not hiding in this van, Chayamaka said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. It did not shake at all. Those are my trucks. Those are my drivers. And if Jun Wu thinks he can send his rich little lapdogs to destroy my life, he's going to find out exactly who he is dealing with. You don't even know for sure it was him, Marcus argued, swerving hard to avoid a massive pothole in the dirt. The van tipped sharply before slamming back down onto its worn-out shocks. It could be a rival gang. It could be hijackers. It is him, she said coldly. Or it is that old snake Richard who pulls his strings. Either way, it all leads back to the same high-rise office. Up ahead, the dark sky was suddenly stained with a thick, dirty orange glow. A massive cloud of black smoke was rising above the tree line. Shit, Marcus swore loudly. He slammed his foot on the gas pedal. The van roared, tearing down the last stretch of the dirt road. They came around a sharp bend, and the horrifying scene finally came into view. The dirt road was completely blocked. Frank's massive 18-wheeler was flipped onto its side, tearing up the dirt and crushing a line of small trees. Thick grey smoke was pouring out from under the crushed hood of the rig, and small orange flames were licking at the dry grass near the fuel tank. Just a few yards away, Big Dan's truck sat completely paralyzed. All 18 of his giant tires had been slashed to ribbons, the heavy metal rims sinking deep into the mud. Parked horizontally across the road, blocking any chance of escape, were 3 shiny black SUVs. Their headlights were blindingly bright. 4 men dressed in dark jeans and black shirts were walking around the wrecked trucks. One of them was holding a metal baseball bat, smashing the remaining mirrors off Big Dan's cab. Another man was holding a red plastic gas can, pouring fuel over the back doors of Frank's overturned trailer. Chayamaka did not wait for Marcus to put the van in park. The second they were close enough, she shoved her door open and jumped out into the thick dust. Her high heels sank into the dirt, so she kicked them off immediately. She grabbed a heavy red fire extinguisher from the back of the van with her left hand, keeping a tight grip on the steel wrench with her right. Hey, she screamed at the top of her lungs. Her voice echoed loudly in the empty desert air. Get the fuck away from my trucks. The four men stopped what they were doing and turned to look at her. For a second, nobody moved. The only sounds were the crackle of the growing fire and the loud hiss of a busted radiator. Then, the biggest man, the one holding the baseball bat, let out a loud, ugly laugh. He dropped his bat to his side and started walking slowly toward her. "Well, look at this," the big man said, spitting a wad of dark tobacco onto the dirt. The little boss lady came out to cry over her broken toys. "You should have stayed in the city, sweetheart. This is grown men's business." "Marcus, get Frank out of the cab," Chiamaka ordered, not taking her eyes off the big man. Marcus scrambled out of the van and ran toward the flipped truck, pulling a crowbar from his belt to pry the smashed door open. Chiamaka marched forward. The hot dirt burned the bottoms of her bare feet, but she ignored the pain. She lifted the heavy fire extinguisher, pulled the metal pin with her teeth, and aimed the black hose right at the fire spreading near the fuel tank. She squeezed the handle. A massive cloud of freezing white foam blasted out, covering the flames and hissing loudly as it hit the hot metal. The big man stepped right in front of her, blocking her path to the rest of the truck. "I said back off, bitch," he growled. He raised the metal baseball bat, pointing it right at her face. "My boss paid good money to see these boxes burn. You are not putting that fire out." Chiamaka dropped the empty fire extinguisher. It hit the dirt with a heavy thud. She looked up at the huge man standing over her. He was twice her size, with thick, tattooed arms and a mean, ugly scar across his nose. She did not feel an ounce of fear. All the grief, all the pain of the last 3 years, and all the anger she felt toward Jun Wu boiled over into pure, blinding rage. "Move," Chiamaka said. Her fingers tightened around the steel wrench. "Or what?" the man mocked. He took a step closer, raising the bat higher. "You going to hit me with that little tool? Go home, little girl, before I break your pretty face." He swung the bat. It was a lazy warning swing meant to scare her into backing down. But Chiamaka did not back down. She ducked smoothly under the heavy metal bat, feeling the wind rush over her hair. Before the man could recover his balance, she gripped the wrench with both hands and swung it as hard as she could, aiming right for his kneecap. The heavy steel connected with a sickening, wet crunch. The giant man let out a high-pitched scream. His leg gave out instantly, and he crashed down into the dirt, dropping his bat and grabbing his shattered knee. He rolled on the ground, swearing and crying in pain. The other 3 men froze in pure shock. They stared at the tiny woman standing barefoot in the dirt, breathing hard, holding a wrench dripping with blood. "I told you to move," Chiamaka said loudly, glaring at the remaining men. "Now drop the gas can and get the hell out of my sight, or I will break your legs too." "Grab her," one of the men yelled. He dropped his gas can and sprinted at her. The other 2 men followed right behind him. Chiamaka swung the wrench again, catching the first man in the ribs. He grunted and stumbled back, but the second man grabbed her from behind. He wrapped his thick arms around her waist, lifting her entirely off the ground. She kicked her bare feet wildly, throwing her head back and smashing her skull against his nose. The man cursed loudly, his nose bursting with blood, but he did not let go. The third man stepped up and grabbed her right wrist, twisting it hard until her fingers went numb. The heavy steel wrench slipped from her hand and fell into the dirt. "Hold her still," the man with the bloody nose yelled, spitting blood onto the back of her white shirt. "I am going to teach this crazy bitch a lesson." He raised a heavy fist, aiming right for her stomach. Chiamaka closed her eyes and braced for the impact. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light swept across the dirt road. The loud, screaming roar of a high-performance engine cut through the night. A sleek silver sports car came flying around the bend at 70 miles an hour. It did not slow down. It rocketed toward the black SUVs, slamming its brakes at the very last second. The tires locked up, screeching violently against the dirt and kicking up a massive wall of brown dust. The car drifted completely sideways and slammed hard into the side of the closest SUV with a loud, crunching bang. Everyone froze. The man holding Chiamaka's waist loosened his grip just a fraction. The driver's door of the silver sports car burst open. Jun Wu stepped out into the swirling dust. He was not wearing his expensive suit jacket. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His dark hair was a mess, but it was his face that made the blood run cold in Chiamaka's veins. He looked like a wild animal. His dark eyes were wide and completely wild with pure, unhinged fury. His chest was heaving up and down. He looked at the flipped truck. He looked at the burning fire, and then his eyes locked onto the man holding Chiamaka's arms behind her back. A terrible, dark silence fell over the dirt road. The brainwashing, the lies Valerie had told him, the fake stories Richard had planted in his head, none of it mattered in this exact second. His broken brain could not remember her name, but his body remembered everything. His soul recognized the woman standing in the dirt, and seeing another man's hands on her made a violent, protective rage explode inside his chest. It felt like a bomb going off in his blood. "Let her go," Jun Wu commanded. His voice was low, rough, and vibrating with a promise of absolute murder. The man holding Chiamaka looked confused. He squinted through the dust at the billionaire standing by the wrecked car. "Mr. CEO," the thug asked, completely bewildered. "What are you doing out here? Your partner Richard paid us to handle this. We are just burning the cargo like he asked." Jun Wu felt a sharp, stabbing pain shoot through his skull. Richard, that lying old bastard, had gone behind his back and ordered a hit on her trucks. He had hired street trash to put their hands on her. The pain in his head was blinding, flashing a sudden memory behind his eyes. Chiamaka smiling at him, wearing a white dress, holding his face gently between her soft hands. "I said," Jun Wu roared, stepping forward, "let her fucking go." He did not wait for them to obey. He lunged forward, moving faster than any man in a boardroom ever should. He grabbed the thug holding Chiamaka's wrist by the collar of his shirt and violently threw him backward into the dirt. The man hit the ground hard, gasping for air. The man holding Chiamaka's waist finally let her go, stepping back with his hands raised in panic. "Hey man, wait, we work for your people." Jun Wu did not care. He grabbed the man by his throat, slamming him back against the side of the black SUV. The metal dented loudly under the impact. Jun Wu pulled his fist back and punched the man squarely in the jaw. The sound of bone breaking echoed in the quiet night. The man went entirely limp, sliding down the side of the car and collapsing into the dirt like a broken doll. The last remaining thug, the one Chiamaka had hit in the ribs, took one look at Jun Wu's face and decided he did not want to die tonight. He scrambled backward, grabbed his friend from the dirt, and dragged him toward the farthest SUV. The man with the shattered knee was already crawling into the back seat, crying loudly. "Get in, drive," one of them screamed. The engines of the two remaining SUVs roared to life. They threw the cars into reverse, spinning their tires wildly in the dirt, and sped away backward down the dark road, leaving their wrecked third car behind. The heavy silence returned to the dirt road. The only sound was the soft crackle of the remaining fire and the hiss of the broken truck. Marcus had successfully pulled Frank from the cab and was sitting with him on the grass, checking his head for injuries. Chiamaka stood perfectly still in the middle of the road. Her white blouse was covered in dark dirt and drops of blood. Her bare feet were scraped and dirty. She was breathing hard, her chest rising and falling quickly. Jun Wu stood a few feet away from her. His knuckles were split open and bleeding freely down his hand, the dark blood dripping onto the Texas dirt. He stared at his own hands for a long moment as if he did not understand how they got there. He looked completely lost. The dangerous, cold CEO was totally gone. Right now, he looked like a man waking up from a terrible nightmare, confused by the world around him. He slowly looked up. His dark eyes met Chiamaka's. "Why did you come here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her throat was tight. Jun Wu stared at her face. He looked at a small smudge of black grease on her cheek. Without thinking, he took a slow step toward her, then another. He stopped right in front of her. He was so close she could feel the heat radiating off his chest. He reached up with his uninjured hand, his fingers trembling slightly. He gently brushed his thumb over the black grease on her cheek, wiping it away. His touch was incredibly soft, a complete contrast to the brutal violence he had just committed. "I don't know," he whispered back, his voice thick with raw pain. He stared deeply into her eyes, searching for an answer his broken brain could not give him. "They told me you were the enemy. They told me I hated you, but when I saw him holding you, I felt like I was watching someone burn my own heart." Chiamaka let out a shaky breath, a single tear finally escaping her eye and sliding down her cheek, washing away the dust. She did not wipe it away. She just kept looking at the man she loved, the man who was finally, slowly, starting to wake up. Jun Wu kept his thumb pressed against her skin for just a second longer. He felt the soft, hot tears sliding over his rough fingers. His heart was beating so fast it felt like it was going to break his ribs. He did not understand what was happening to him. His brain was screaming at him to step back, to remember that this woman was a dangerous liar. But his body refused to listen. His body wanted to pull her in, bury his face in her neck, and never let her go. Then, a sudden, blinding spike of pain shot through his temples. Jun Wu gasped loudly and pulled his hand away as if her skin had suddenly turned to fire. He stumbled backward, grabbing the sides of his head with both hands, his face twisted in pure agony. A sudden flash of memory hit him so hard his knees actually buckled. He saw a bridge. He saw rain hitting a windshield. He felt the violent, crushing impact of metal smashing into metal, and he heard a woman screaming his name in absolute terror. The voice was not Valerie's. The voice belonged to the woman standing right in front of him. Jun Wu, Chayamaka yelled, stepping toward him as he dropped to one knee in the dirt. Stay back, he ground out through clenched teeth. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to force the painful images out of his mind. He was breathing in heavy, ragged gasps. Stay away from me. I don't know what you are doing to my head, but you need to stop. I'm not doing anything to you, she said, her voice cracking. She stopped walking, leaving a few feet of empty space between them. She wanted to hold him, but she knew she could not push him. His mind was fighting a war against 3 years of heavy brainwashing. Richard is the one who messed with your head. He stole you after the crash. He filled your brain with lies to take your money, Jun Wu. You have to fight it. Jun Wu slowly opened his eyes. He looked up at her from the dirt. His dark eyes were bloodshot and completely exhausted. The pain was still pounding behind his skull, but the anger was gone. There was only a deep, terrifying emptiness left. Before he could say anything else, Marcus ran over from the wrecked truck. He stopped short when he saw the billionaire kneeling in the dirt, his expensive clothes covered in dust and blood. Marcus said, breathing hard. He pointed back toward the flipped rig. Frank is okay. He just has a nasty cut on his forehead, but we have a massive problem. The fire is out, but Big Dan's truck is completely dead. All the tires are gone. We cannot move it, and it is blocking the whole road. The rest of the convoy is stuck behind him. We are not going to make the Dallas drop-off by midnight. Chayamaka snapped her head toward Marcus. The soft, vulnerable look on her face instantly vanished. The tears stopped. She was the boss again, the woman who built an empire out of her own grief. She looked past Marcus at the long line of massive trucks idling on the dirt road, their bright headlights cutting through the dust. We are not quitting, Chayamaka said firmly. She walked past Jun Wu, totally ignoring the fact that he was still kneeling on the ground. She marched right up to Big Dan, who was leaning against his ruined truck looking furious. Dan, get your crew. Unhook the trailer from your dead cab. We will use the repair van's heavy winch to drag your cab off the road into the ditch. That will leave just enough room for the other trucks to squeeze past. Boss, you want to dump my cab in the ditch? Big Dan asked, his eyes going wide. That will wreck the suspension completely. I will buy you a brand new one on Monday, Chayamaka promised, not missing a beat. Just get it out of the way. We have a deadline, and I am not losing this bet because some rich assholes tried to play dirty. Move. The men immediately jumped into action. They grabbed heavy metal chains from the repair van and started hooking them up to the front bumper of the dead truck. The loud sounds of clanking metal and shouting men filled the air again. Jun Wu stood up slowly. He watched Chayamaka direct the crew. She was covered in dirt barefoot, and her white shirt was stained with blood, but she stood tall and completely fearless. He remembered the story Valerie had told him. She said Chayamaka was a weak, greedy little girl who cut his brakes because she wanted his money. She said Chayamaka ran away like a coward after the crash. He looked at the woman commanding a group of giant, rough men in the middle of a dark desert road. The lie completely shattered in his mind. This woman was no coward. This woman was a force of nature, and she was fighting a war just to get him back. He walked slowly over to her. The loud noise of the heavy winch pulling the dead truck made it hard to hear, so he had to step close. Chayamaka turned her head and looked up at him. I did not send those men, Jun Wu said. His voice was rough, but it was completely steady. I play to win and I play hard, but I do not hide behind hired trash. I would never order someone to hurt you. Chayamaka looked at the dark, drying blood on his knuckles. He had broken a man's jaw just for touching her. She knew he was telling the truth. I know, she said quietly. Richard did it. He knows I am winning the bet. He knows if I win I get to stay near you. He is terrified that if I stay near you your memory will come back and he will lose his golden goose. Jun Wu tightened his jaw. A muscle jumped in his cheek. You better win, he said softly, his dark eyes locking onto hers. You better get those trucks to Dallas, Ms. Chayamaka, because if you do I owe you a dinner, and you have a lot of explaining to do. He did not wait for her to answer. He turned around and walked back to his wrecked silver sports car. The whole front end was smashed in from hitting the SUV, but the engine still ran. He got in, slammed the door and threw the car into reverse. He backed up smoothly, turned the car around in the dirt, and sped off into the dark night, leaving a trail of red taillights behind him. Chayamaka stood in the dirt and watched him go. A slow, genuine smile spread across her tired face. He was coming back to her. It was going to be messy and it was going to be dangerous, but he was finally starting to wake up. "Cab is clear," Big Dan yelled loudly. The heavy truck crashed into the deep dirt ditch with a loud, terrible crunch. The road was finally open. "Get in your rigs," Chayamaka shouted to the drivers. "Put the hammer down, we are going to Dallas." The drive back to the massive city of Houston felt like a fever dream to Jun Wu. The hot wind whipped through the broken windows of his ruined sports car, but he barely felt it. His mind was completely consumed by fragments of the past. Every mile he drove, another locked door in his brain seemed to crack open. He remembered the smell of vanilla. He remembered the sound of a woman humming a soft, low song while she cooked. He remembered buying a ring. It was a simple silver band with a small, perfect diamond. He remembered holding it in his hand, feeling completely terrified and completely happy at the exact same time. By the time he pulled into the secure underground parking garage of his penthouse building, the headache was almost gone. It was replaced by a cold, sharp, deadly clarity. He had been played. For 3 years he had been a puppet for Richard and Valerie. They had used his broken brain to control his money and his company. He rode the private elevator up to the top floor. The doors slid open silently. His penthouse was massive, modern, and completely empty of any real warmth. It was all glass, white marble, and sharp edges. Valerie was sitting on the expensive white leather sofa in the middle of the living room. She was wearing a tiny silk robe, holding a glass of champagne. When she saw him walk in, she jumped up, her face turning into a mask of fake, exaggerated worry. "June, oh my God, look at you," she cried out. She ran over to him, her eyes wide as she took in his ruined shirt, the dirt on his pants, and the dried blood covering his hands. "What happened? Where have you been all night? My father has been trying to call you for hours." She reached out to touch his chest, but Jun Wu caught her wrist before her fingers could make contact. His grip was completely unforgiving. It was a hard, trapping hold that made Valerie gasp in shock. "Let go of me, June," she whined, trying to pull her arm back. "You are hurting me." "Where is your father?" Jun Wu asked. His voice was totally flat. It was the voice of a man who was ready to bury someone. "He is at home, I don't know," Valerie said, her voice rising in panic. She looked up into his face and saw something terrifying. The blank, confused man she was used to manipulating was gone. The man holding her wrist was a predator, fully awake and fully aware. "June, please, you are scaring me. What is going on?" "Your father sent a crew of armed thugs to attack Chayamaka's trucks tonight," Jun Wu said slowly, watching every tiny twitch of her eyes. "He paid them to run her drivers off the road and burn the cargo. Did you know about it?" Valerie's face went totally pale. She tried to hide it, but the panic in her eyes gave her away instantly. I don't know what you are talking about. My father would never do something like that. That crazy woman probably hired those guys herself to make us look bad. She is a liar, June. Remember what we told you." Jun Wu felt a deep, ugly wave of disgust wash over him. He had shared meals with these people. He had let this woman touch him. He dropped her wrist, pushing her away slightly. Valerie stumbled back, rubbing her red skin. "I remember exactly what you told me," Jun Wu said, stepping closer to her. He backed her up against the edge of a heavy glass table. "You told me she was a monster. You told me she cut my brakes. You told me she abandoned me." "She did," Valerie yelled, desperate to keep the lie alive. "She tried to kill you, we saved you." "I saw her tonight," Jun Wu interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I watched a man twice her size hold a metal bat to her face and she did not even flinch. I watched her fight to protect her people. She is not a coward, Valerie, and she sure as hell is not a killer." Valerie stared at him, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She had no idea what to say. The brainwashing was supposed to be permanent. The doctors had sworn he would never recover his real memories. "Pack your bags," Jun Wu ordered coldly. He turned his back on her and walked toward his bedroom. "You have exactly 1 hour to get your trash out of my apartment. If you are still here when I take my shower, I will have my security team throw you out into the street wearing nothing but that cheap robe." "You cannot do this to me," Valerie screamed, her fake sweet voice totally dropping away. She sounded harsh and ugly. My father controls half your board of directors. If you throw me out, he will ruin you. He will take everything you have. Jun Wu stopped walking. He slowly turned his head to look over his shoulder. A dark, terrifying smile curved the corner of his mouth. Tell Richard to try, Jun Wu said softly. Tell him to bring everything he has, because starting tomorrow I am going to tear his life apart piece by piece. He walked into his bedroom and slammed the heavy door shut, leaving Valerie shaking with pure fear in the middle of the living room. The next morning the Texas sun rose hot and bright, baking the city of Houston in another day of brutal heat. Inside the South Star shipping dispatch office, the broken AC unit had finally been replaced. Cool air was blasting through the small room, but Chayamaka was too tired to even feel it. She was sitting at her desk, her head resting on her folded arms, fast asleep. The door to the office slammed open, hitting the wall with a loud bang. Chayamaka jumped awake, her heart instantly racing. She grabbed the edge of her desk, looking around wildly. Marcus was standing in the doorway. He was holding a large, steaming cup of coffee and a thick stack of printed papers. He had a massive, unbelievable grin spreading across his face through his thick beard. "Wake up, boss," Marcus said loudly, walking over and slamming the coffee down on her desk. "We did it." Chayamaka blinked, rubbing the sleep out of her eyes. She sat up straight, her muscles aching from the fight the night before. "What time is it? Did Dan make it?" "It is 8 in the morning," Marcus said, tapping the stack of papers. "Dan made it. The whole convoy made it. They dropped the electronics in Dallas at exactly 3 in the morning. I just ran the final numbers for the week." He handed her the top sheet of paper. Chayamaka took it with shaking hands. She looked at the bold black numbers printed at the bottom of the page. 52%, she whispered, her voice totally breathless. She read it again to make sure she was not hallucinating. "We beat his numbers by 52%. "We won the bet," Marcus laughed loudly, throwing his hands in the air. "We officially beat CO Logistics. They are eating our dust, Marka. We keep the company and we keep our jobs." Chayamaka dropped the paper onto the desk. A massive wave of relief washed over her, so heavy it almost made her cry. She covered her face with her hands and let out a long, shaky laugh. She had risked absolutely everything, and she had won. Suddenly, the phone on her desk rang. It was her private line. The only people who had this number were Marcus, her bank, and the front desk of the main CO Logistics building. She took a deep breath, picked up the receiver and pressed it to her ear. Chayamaka speaking. "I am a man of my word," Jun Wu's deep, smooth voice came through the speaker. He sounded completely different than he had the night before. The wild anger was gone. He sounded in control. He sounded like the powerful CEO he was. "You beat my numbers, Ms. Chayamaka. You keep your little company." Chayamaka smiled. She leaned back in her chair. "It was never a little company, Mr. CEO. You just underestimated me." "I won't make that mistake again," he replied smoothly. There was a brief silence on the line, the kind of silence that held 1,000 words they were both too careful to say. "Our bet included dinner. I am sending a car to your apartment at 7 o'clock tonight. Wear something nice. We have a lot to talk about." "I don't get in cars with strangers," she challenged him, her voice playful but guarded. "I am not a stranger," Jun Wu said quietly. The confidence in his voice vanished for just a split second, replaced by something deep and raw. "I don't know who I am to you yet, but I know I am not a stranger. 7 o'clock, Chayamaka, don't be late." He hung up the phone before she could reply. Chayamaka slowly lowered the receiver back to its base. Her heart was doing backflips in her chest. She looked at Marcus, who was watching her with raised eyebrows. "Get the repair team out to the ditch to pull Big Dan's cab out," Chayamaka ordered, standing up from her desk. She smoothed down her wrinkled clothes. "And tell the drivers their bonus cash will be in their accounts by noon." "Where are you going?" Marcus asked, stepping out of her way as she walked toward the door. "I am going home to sleep," Chayamaka said, her eyes shining with fierce, unstoppable hope. "And then I am going on a date with a dead man."